One. Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. So I did something really weird today, and I Googled a word and I came up with 6 billion whatevers, ideas, whatever they are, websites, whatever. And the word is leadership. And we hear it like all over the place. It's everywhere. Sometimes it's manager, sometimes it's leader, sometimes it's boss. I mean, it's all these different words. And so, I think, and when I wrote my book, Growing on Purpose, it was because I run into a bunch of people that grow by mistake. And so I wanted to find somebody that is intentional with growth. And so I'm honored to be hanging out with Dr. William Attaway. How are you today?
Man, it's great, Dave. Thanks for having me on your show. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. I'm honored to have you with us. You're the founder of Catalytic Leadership. So I've been looking around and stalking you. So if that was me in your bushes the other night, just so you know. But I see that you're involved with John Maxwell Leadership. You're an adjunct professor. You're a pastor. You're an author, speaker. You got all this awesome stuff going on in your life, which is fantastic. And I was curious, tell me a little bit about Catalytic Leadership and what does that mean to you?
It actually comes out of a bit of my story. When I went to college, I went as a pre-pharmacy student. I wanted to go into pharmacy. I'd worked in a pharmacy in high school, thought this would be a great way to help people in a tangible way. We got through a year and a half and decided at organic chemistry that this is not really what I want to spend the rest of my life doing. So,
and understand why.
Change directions there. But in my brief chemistry studies, I discovered the power of a catalyst. A catalyst is something that you introduce to accelerate or to incite significant change with the intent of producing an impact. And I've been a student of leadership for 30 plus years. I attended my first leadership conference when I was 15 years old. Wow. And so I have been studying and learning from leaders my whole life. And as I read that definition of a catalyst, I thought, that's something leaders would resonate with, to accelerate or incite significant change to make an impact. Sure. That's what leaders do. And so what I've tried to do over my lifetime, my journey, is to learn about how leaders can be catalytic in how they lead. And as I've been coaching leaders for the last 20 plus years, I've tried to help them learn how to be catalytic. And so the catalytic leadership to me is that it's learning to incite or accelerate significant change with the purpose of producing an impact.
With other people then primarily?
Absolutely. With other people, with organizations, with missions, with goals.
That's awesome. And that's why I think it was so, I'm honored you're hanging out with us because again, for somebody that is magically owning a company, we're just going to fast forward to boom, you own a company, whether it's just you or you got 10 people or 100, whatever. And if leadership comes up, William, and you jump on Google and you Google it, there's 6 billion options. So I'm assuming the options at the top are the ones that paid the most amount of money to be on the top. Right? Doesn't mean they're the best. It just means they paid the most to be on top. So, but in preparing for today, what I really liked was your concept that, one size doesn't fit all for leadership. So that's where I think it's so unique because there's so many different leadership styles. There's so many different paths that we can go as leaders. So I'm just curious, when you started at 15 looking around, you probably found a bunch of different leadership ideas. How did you land on the one that you're currently, on that today?
I've been incredibly privileged and honored in my life to learn from so many leaders. I read voraciously, and I have since I was a kid. To learn from leaders throughout history and contemporary today, to look around and get to interview people and talk with people and ask questions. I think that's how you develop your own leadership style, your own leadership model. So for me, I can't begin to tell you how many different leaders have poured into me over the last 30, 35 years to help me develop who I am today. Sure. I didn't make up all this on my own, right? Yeah. But as I look back over the landscape, And I think, there's so many. I mean, John Maxwell would probably be near the top of the list. I mean, incredible leadership writer and speaker in our day. He's written over 100 books, most of which I've read, because he writes in an accessible way. No matter where you are, no matter what your field, you're gonna walk away with something. You're gonna walk away with something practical and tangible and actionable, and that's important to me. But there's so many voices that have spoken into my life. And I think our job is not just to be a reservoir of the people that God puts in our lives. It's to be a conduit of what we've learned and share that with other people.
Sure. That's awesome. So I want to ask you off script here, history wise, if you had to pick a leader, who would you who do you resonate with thinking back into the history of the US or the world or whatever? Where do you land?
Well, if I could sit down with anybody and just have a conversation, I think the leader throughout history, the one that comes to mind so often is George Washington.
Okay.
Because here's a guy who did not seek out the leadership role that he was ultimately in, the one we know him best for, the first president.
Sure.
He didn't seek that out. And when he did this for 2 terms, and people wanted him to keep going. And there was no reason he couldn't, but he said, no, I'm gonna choose to lay it down. It's somebody else's time.
Sure.
And I'd love to have a conversation about that, because so many leaders in our day and throughout history, they cling to the reins of power,
right,
as though, like, by doing so they're going to avoid death. Like, I have to be in control. I have to stay.
Right.
This guy had something different. He had a humility about him. And I would love to have a conversation and find out more about this guy.
That's totally cool. And I think you bring up a really good point there, William, in that, I've always seen people that seek leadership. When you're seeking that role, like I think all the way back to when my first job was making pizzas at Shakey's Pizza. And, gosh, now I'm going to get hungry talking about this story, but, it's one of those things that I was 15 years old, and it didn't take more than probably a month for me to start thinking, man, I wish I was the boss.
Yeah, absolutely right.
No clue what I was doing, right? But it just seemed like there was something there that was gravitating. And I think it's great that, people, if you're seeking it, it sometimes is, you got to understand why you're seeking it. I know for myself, I was seeking it for the wrong reasons. And when you think about what you just said about George Washington, I mean, he really wasn't seeking that, like you said, and was he the one that created the 2-term limit then? Is that kind of where that started,
He set the model for it. It wouldn't be codified until later, but he's the one who said, I think that's sufficient. I think that's good. It was after FDR, who, after winning 4 terms, that Congress said, I think maybe we should stick with 2. Let's go back to Washington and follow that model.
Wow,
but
that's
he
so
really
cool.
saw that as a positive thing for leaders to go back and live under the laws that they helped to create and execute.
Yeah.
What a novel idea.
Well, and the 2 words that that resonated with me was grow and thrive. So when you think about, when somebody comes to you and says, I want to grow and thrive in my leadership, kind of walk us through what that looks like from your world.
To choose to grow is simply a choice. You decide whether you will grow or whether you won't. Nobody grows accidentally. You're not going to wake up one day and say, oh, wow, I'm a fully developed, mature leader. How did that happen?
Sure.
It doesn't work like that. You have to intentionally choose that. And so I think that's the first step. So if somebody comes and says, I want to grow, I want to thrive in my life and in my leadership, the first thing I make sure of is we understand this is a choice, and growth only happens on the other side of change. And so that means change is going to be a part of the journey. And if you get buy-in there and somebody says, okay, I get that, I want to grow, I'm willing to make changes to make that happen. Well, now we have a teachable spirit. Now we have somebody who understands how this is going to work, and we can work with that. It's when somebody says, I want to grow, but I don't want to change. I want to grow, but I don't want to do anything different. Okay.
Well, here's the deal. I grow, you change, William. That's what I'm thinking, right?
That's right.
I mean, that's the leadership mantra. I want to grow. I want to expand, whatever that looks like. But all my dominions, all my little minions, whatever, they're the ones that have to change. And that's really, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's how I would have verbalized it at 15 years old, and probably even later, if I was really brutally honest, was I want to be in charge because I want to tell people what to do, or I want to. So that's what I think is awesome. So if you are at that spot, and you don't want to change, I guess what I'm hearing is growth is going to be a whole lot harder for you. Real substantial growth is difficult when you're not really willing to self-assess first, I guess, is the spot to start, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no way to get there. What you're going to find is that you're developing something that is not leadership. You're developing something that's self-serving. Leadership is about serving others. If you're focused on what your benefits are, what you gain from the equation, that's not leadership. That's something else.
Now hear all those breaks going on right now. All these people are listening going, what? I got to serve others? I thought this was about serving myself. That's why I'm in charge. So I have a really tough question, because it just popped up in my mind. There's this where do you find the balance between entrepreneur, business owner? I want to call my own shots, because let's face it, a lot of people jump into business for that particular reason. Where do you balance that with the serving others piece? How do you work through those things with people that you come in contact with?
Hey, that's a great question. And I think it's important, because most of my coaching clients right now are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, founders. And so I talk to them and I hear their journeys, and of course, being part of this journey myself, you do want that freedom. You do want the freedom to set your own schedule and leverage the best of your skills and your passions and your efforts, right, to accomplish something, to incite or accelerate significant change, to make an impact, right? You want to be catalytic, but that's focused on what you want. And if that's where it stops, if you stop there and it's really just about creating the life that you want to live with the schedule you want, where you want, when you want, that's focused on you. It has to move beyond that. And for most, I find that it does. For most, they want to make an impact that's going to impact other people, that's going to accomplish something, that's going to serve other people with a skill or with a talent or with a service. It's going to help them to improve and get better. Well, we can work with that, because that's focused outside of yourself. Now, can you do that in a way that best satisfies that desire to craft your life in a way that is sustainable, that allows you to provide for your family and put them first, that allows you to spend time with those closest to you? Of course you can. It's a choice. You have to determine it intentionally. But once you do, I think you can accomplish both things. The problem is when you only choose to focus on yourself, then you have a problem.
So, and that's a great question that I have, that I'm trying to wrestle with, or what are some small things? Because there are people listening today, they've heard this before, William. They've chosen not to, do it for whatever reason, but there's probably somebody today right now that's like, you know what? Maybe this serving myself isn't necessarily the correct way or the best way, whatever words work for you. So what are some small things that you would encourage somebody listening to kind of just expand their horizon? How can I serve others in a super small way that's not like going to the mission field, or not, becoming a nonprofit, or giving all my money away to my team? We tend to think in black or white, or at least I do. So I go from like one extreme to the other. It's either all about me, right? Who cares about everyone else, or it's all about everybody else, and I get put aside that way as well. So in the middle somewhere, do you have any ideas, or what do you teach for small ways to start serving others in this scenario?
I think it begins with listening. I would start with those closest to you.
Okay.
I have a number of direct reports, and each week I meet with my direct reports one-on-one, and they have time every week with me where we're going to talk and I'm going to listen. There may be things I bring to that meeting that I want to share with them, right? Things I want them to do or accomplish, or I want updates on something, but it's really their time. And I make this abundantly clear. And what I want to focus my time doing is listening. The reason that I do that is so that I can best add value to them. I want to help them achieve and accomplish and succeed. I want to help them grow and thrive. So
Okay.
when I'm doing that inside my team, that's a small thing, right? That's a time I've set aside every week where we're going to meet, but I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen for ways that I can help accelerate them, where I can help boost them, lift them up, and not just with what they do during work. I don't want them to see that, to think that I see them as simply a cog in the machine that's
Sure.
accomplishing a task.
Yeah.
They're actually a 3D human being. And I want to help them grow and thrive in every part of their life. I think any leader listening can do that with those closest to them. If you've got a small team of 1 or 2 or 5, this is not hard, right? Listen,
Sure.
ask questions. And when you do that, you're going to communicate that they matter to you. And in so doing, they're going to be empowered, and they're
Yeah.
going to lean into what you're doing
Right.
in a way that they might never have.
Wow, that's awesome. And I love the fact that those, I look at them as 3: listen, add value, ask questions. Those 3 things that you just laid out don't cost me a penny. I mean, we're so often looking for, these things that don't cost us money. Now they do cost time, and they do cost energy. So, it's not like it's a totally free deal, but to not have to pay money and to invest in somebody. I mean, Gallup shows, we talk about it all the time. Gallup shows 2 out of 3 people are not engaged in their job.
Yes.
Right. They show up every day. They want to say things like, it's not my job. They want to leave and go, oh my gosh, I spent the whole day and I didn't work and I got paid for it, whatever
Right.
that looks like, right, for different people. But I think that if you're a leader and your team's not engaged, my first question is always to the leader is, what are you doing to engage that team? What are you doing? Rather than the leader saying, man, my team sucks. It's no good. If I had a good team, I wouldn't, have this problem. So,
right.
That's the cool part about what we just shared is that, these things don't cost money, but they do cost time. And I got to believe it might be easier for you certain days of the week for you just to throw money at it rather than time. Is that, do you have that temptation sometimes?
Absolutely. Time is the one non-renewable resource, right? You can make more money. You can't make more time. No manufacturing of extra time. If there were, everybody would be investing in that particular.
Right. Exactly.
But it doesn't exist. So you're communicating to them when you invest your time with them, you're communicating to them they matter enough that you're going to give them the most valuable thing you have, your time.
So when someone walks into your office and they want you to work with them, a leader says, hey, I need some help. Do you create like a personal leadership growth plan? What does that look like? Once we have said, okay, I want to grow and I have to change. Once we've kind of worked through that chunk that you started with, what would be the next step from that standpoint?
The next step is to discover exactly what it is they want to grow in. Okay. What are the areas that we need to focus on? And that's where we're going to start. I customize this for each one of my coaching clients, because I want them to understand that there is not, as you said earlier, there's not a one size fits all here. I'm not just going to give you, here's the model, plug yourself into it. And, it might not all apply, but you figure it out. No, we're going to customize this for you. Maybe you need to focus specifically around what we've been talking about, which is investing in your team. That hasn't been a priority for you, but you want to grow as a leader and you want to be intentional about that. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to coach you in that. I'm going to help you understand what your next steps can be. And I'm going to hold you accountable to that. And that's really the secret sauce of coaching of any kind, is accountability, right? I'm going to ask you, hey, how did that, you said you were going to have this conversation. You were going to set up this meeting and talk about these things. How did that go? And I'm going to ask that. And so when you're tempted not to do it, my hope is that you're going to remember, William's going to ask me about that the next time we meet. I need to just plow through and do that.
Right. Yeah.
And that accountability so often will drive you to take the action you need to take, but for whatever reason, you've been putting it off.
Sure.
I'm going to ask questions to help you see from a different perspective. It's really difficult to see the whole picture when you're in the frame. And I'm not in your frame. I'm outside it. So I can help you see things that you simply can't see in the weeds.
Yep. Yeah. Wow. So I can't believe a pastor just swore on my show. He used the word accountability. Oh my gosh. You're swearing at us, dude. I don't understand it. Okay. Not
How
really.
dare I?
Exactly. I'm not really comfortable with that. I became an entrepreneur business owner, so I don't have to be accountable to anybody but the IRS. Okay. That's the only person in my world that I have to be accountable to. And it's just so funny that we have that mentality.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's actually opposite, because you're accountable to your team, you're accountable to your customers, you're accountable to your vendors or whatever, your suppliers. I mean, you're accountable to everybody at the end of the day. And I think that it's so difficult for us to wrap our brain around that. And that's why, again, we do a lot of work with DISC, just like you do, and the high D driven, results oriented person's like, I'm in charge of my own destiny. There's nobody, they have that thought process, and it's not right or wrong. It's just, the reality is it's really hard to kind of come to grips with, wow, I have to serve my team. I thought I'm building this team so they serve me, and that's really hard, I think. And we're so busy in today's world that we don't even want to slow down enough to put labels on. Yeah, I need help with this. Like you said, where do you want to go with this? I got to believe it's hard for entrepreneurs to answer that question, because they're so busy making payroll. They're so busy. So how do you slow them down? I'm just curious. How do you do that?
The way I do it is with questions. I think that so often I'm going to ask them a question maybe nobody's ever asked them.
Okay.
And they've not been honest with themselves in asking themselves a question. I'm going to ask it, and I'm going to be the one that they understand is for them, 100% for them succeeding, growing, thriving. That's my goal. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to ask the hard questions. That doesn't mean I'm not going to force them to face some issues or challenges or things that they've been trying to avoid. And that's what's holding them back.
Yeah.
By facing it, by dealing with it and overcoming it, then they're going to move forward, and they're going to see the results that they know are possible, but they've never been able to achieve.
And that's like the essence, like you said, of coaching. I don't think any athlete that you can, if you think of an athlete pops in your head, I mean, for me, Tiger Woods just pops in my head all the time. Yeah. If he didn't have a swing coach and he didn't have probably 4 or 5 coaches around him, he would have never, I don't think, been as good as he is or was, and so that's, I think, what's so important about accountability. If you don't have a accountability coach, or you don't have a group, of peers or a peer group or whatever it is, round table, whatever, if you don't have that in your life, I think that that's really what, in this case, William and I do, is we help people with that accountability, because it's really, I know for me, I'm a part-time sales manager for 3 different companies. And I know on a certain day that I'm driving into a client's office, I know that one of my guys is on the phone right now making his calls,
There you go.
because he doesn't want to hear the, hey, I didn't get to it speech, And so it's really, but that's so helpful, their sales go up, their performance goes up, whatever goes up. So I'm assuming accountability is a pretty big tent pole for you in your training, correct?
It really is. It really is. You mentioned the DISC earlier. I'm a high C, and just really C is the majority of anything that I have. Everything else is pretty low.
Sure.
What that means is that I'm analyzing. I'm constantly listening and analyzing. But that means that I can help people who may be more action driven, who are just constantly go, 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 go. Right. I'm going to help them stop, because I'm going to ask them a question, and they're going to have to pause to answer it. This is not a yes or no question. I don't ask a lot of binary questions.
Sure.
I'm going to make you think about it, and then you're going to have to answer it. And then I'm probably going to say, okay, what else? Because that's not deep enough yet. We're going to keep digging, right?
Exactly.
Keep your shovel in your hand with me.
Yeah.
Because we're going to get to the root of it. We're going to get to the bottom, and then we're going to take that, what we've learned, what we've uncovered, and we're going to build from that.
Wow. Well, and I tell you, high C is really the hardest because I'm a high D, high I. So it's really hard for me in my sales career and in my professional career. It has been difficult to communicate with high C's because I'm an emotional person. And again, I don't want to, stereotype. High C people tend to be more factual than they are emotional.
100%.
And it's hard to, it's hard for, so I'm like, well, how in the world did you turn out to be a pastor? That's what I was like, that's my big question. It's like, my gosh, you're a high C. You don't care about people. You just want to preach and get it done with and get on about your day. And, so maybe that's for a different time, but, how do you, so let me ask it this way. How do you use DISC in your training, in your leadership? What tool, how do you use that tool in the day to day?
I think DISC, like any tool, helps us to understand our wiring. And the fact is, every one of us is designed and wired a little differently. When you understand how you're wired and you grow in your awareness, your self-awareness of that, what that helps you do is learn how you lead from that space. When we're young leaders and we're just starting out, we tend to want to emulate or copy leaders that we admire. We look at somebody and we're like, oh, I want to be like that. And so we will even go so far as to mimic their speech patterns, the words and phrases they use, how they dress. I mean, I've watched all of these things happen with young leaders. The problem is when we get stuck there and all of a sudden we are doing that 20 years in. Well, then now you're just basically being a bad copy of a great leader.
Sure.
There's already one of them. We don't need two. We need you to be you. But in order for you to be you, you have to understand how you are wired. And that's where DISC and so many other tools can be helpful because they help you understand and be aware of your wiring. And then you can lead from that space. I said I'm a high C, right? Yeah. On the Myers-Briggs, I could not be more introverted. I'm all the way on the introverted side of the scale. Well, how on earth do I do that and do what I do in my life? Like that doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you understand what that means. It just means I don't draw power from large groups of people, right? That's not where I draw my energy. So I've got to have time where I'm in this room, actually, where I'm pouring into and investing in quiet, where I'm investing in myself so that I can grow. Then I can go out and use all that energy when I'm with people. Yeah. Introverts that doesn't mean you hate people. It just means you don't draw energy from those interactions. Yep. But understanding that wiring helps me to design my life and my workflow in such a way that I can add value in a maximum way to those that I serve.
Wow. Yeah, that's so cool. I never forget when my wife and I were in the same industry and at the same association events earlier in our marriage. And we would be doing a networking event and like we would leave and I would be like spent. I'm like, I got to go home. Right. And she's like, no, we got to go out. Let's go somewhere. Right. She's an extrovert. She gained that energy from that room. And I totally left it there and I had none left. So if you're listening and you're trying to understand the difference between introvert and extrovert, it's exactly what William said is, if you gain energy from those types of events versus give energy, and get drained. I mean, that I learned that. And I was like, I just have to not do something after. It's like when I speak somewhere around the country, it's like, they're like, oh, that must be awesome. You speak and then you got a day to do whatever you want. I'm like, yeah, it takes me a day to recuperate because, I left everything on the stage. I'm like, this is just, intense. I can't go sightsee. I'm in my hotel room, like, wrapped up in a ball because Absolutely. I just left everything there. So,
that's me on a Sunday.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you preach on Sunday morning. Do you guys have a Sunday night service then too?
We don't. Okay. I'm preaching on Sunday morning and then I come home and take a nap because I've got to recharge. Right? That's a huge burst of energy for me with a lot of people. So, leave it all on the field and then go and recharge.
That's awesome. That is so cool. So you talk about never stop leading change, where there's always change going on. So I was just curious as we start to land today, what have you seen this in your life? What are some examples? I'd love to hear real world on how this, works in your world. So what comes to mind when you think about that piece?
Yeah, I think the reason I talk so much about how you can never stop leading it is because growth only happens on the other side of change. And if you ever get into a point where you feel like, hey, I got this, I'm good, I can coast for a bit, you only coast into mediocrity. You never coast into excellence.
Yeah.
And excellence is what inspires other people. Mediocrity never inspires people. I think about that in my own journey. And I think about, for the last 25 years now, after I transitioned from the business world into church world, and I've been leading in this environment, I think about the volunteers, right? I mean, every church runs on volunteers. You can never hire enough staff to do everything, right? So it takes a huge volunteer corps to accomplish the mission that we do. Well, how do you recruit and keep volunteers? It's not just telling them what to do. It's not just, sitting in the corner office and pointing and sending emails and saying, yeah, do all the things. You have to inspire people. Well, what inspires people? Not mediocrity. Excellence inspires people. And the only way you get to excellence is through leading change.
Yeah.
Because growth and excellence only happen on the other side of change. So for me, that's been a persistent theme. We can never settle. We can never say good enough is good enough, because it's not. That's why every week our team asks 3 questions, and they can repeat these questions in their sleep, I'm sure. What went right? What went wrong? And how do we make it better?
Nice.
Those are the 3 things we're asking all the time, because we evaluate everything ruthlessly. Because we want to make it better, because that's what inspires people to want to be a part of it and to lead out using their most valuable resource, their time, for the benefit of other people around them.
Wow. That's so cool. Well, and I think one thing that DISC really does help out is, like, in that spot that you said, there are certain people that need to have to be told what to do. Yeah. So there are certain personality styles that are like, hey, I show up and I'm a volunteer. You just tell me what to do, William, and I'm going to do it. Right. And then there's certain people that need to understand why it is, need to understand the parameters. They need to, get more detail, whatever. And that's where I think DISC is so helpful at work, at church, wherever you're, planted, is that you're in that situation where if you just think about it from your perspective, there's only half the perspective. This is the way I would do it. So then everybody on the whole team has to do it my way. Yeah. And I think that that's what's cool about DISC, is you want that multiplicity, so to speak, of personalities, so that you have all these different people in that team. And that's what really brings a strong team forward. So I appreciate that you share that. The other piece that I wrote down the word momentum, because, like you said, if you take your foot off the gas, it takes, and I can't remember the story, but the gist of it was, it's really not that hard to keep a train going once it's started, but when it stops, the momentum required and the energy required to start that train is so incredibly, massive. Yeah. And so that's where, take some time at times for yourself, take some time for your family. Obviously, we're not, encouraging 24/7. There is plenty of that where we need to take that 7th day off. But in this case, if you do keep your foot off the pedal long enough, you eventually stop, and it's really hard to get started again. So I don't know if you, again, have any thoughts on that. Have you seen that in your life where, you took your foot off and then it's like, I got to get back on this thing here, So I was just curious what comes to your mind.
Here's a really recent example. During COVID, right? So during COVID, I'm outside Washington, D.C. Our church is in the western suburbs out by Dulles Airport. And the local restrictions here, as you might imagine, were pretty significant for a very long time. Sure. Our schools did not fully open without a lot of restrictions, masks and whatnot. Like, all that didn't really go away until just a few months ago, as we're recording this. Yeah. So that lasted for 2 years. Wow. So for our church, the organization that I lead, trying to figure out how to navigate those challenges, what our board and our team decided was we actually had our physical campus closed for 15 months of that. Yeah. So we were digital only for 15 months. I have never led an organization that was only digital. right? That was new, right?
Yeah, sure.
And then after 15 months, in June of 2021, we reopened the physical campus from a dead stop.
Sure. Yep. Wow.
There is no momentum.
Yeah.
The foot hasn't been on the gas in 15 months,
Jeez,
not
yeah.
in person.
Yep.
And so now you're trying to create momentum from a dead stop.
Yep.
Boy, I'll tell you what, that was a different experience for me. I've been doing this for a little while.
Yeah.
I've never, ever tried to lead anything like that. And now on this side of that,
Sure.
operating both of those threads, what we do in person and what we do digitally in a hybrid way,
Yep.
so that we're able to serve both audiences, so to speak,
Right.
both
Yep.
groups of people. That's a different leadership model. That's a different way to think.
Right.
And I'm not saying we're getting it all right yet, but
Sure.
we're constantly learning and we're constantly asking the questions. How do we make this better?
Yeah.
Just this week, I had one of my team say, hey, where you landed on Sunday when you finished talking was great for the people in the room. Were you thinking about anybody watching online?
Oh, wow.
And that was the right
I'll
question.
fire that guy. Whoever said that. Let's get him out of here. This is ridiculous. How dare he challenge you?
I said, you know what? You are spot on. I didn't think about that at all. I completely missed that.
Yeah.
But you know what that's going to do? Next time, I'm going to have that in my mind. And that's how we get better. And that's how I encourage our team to think. Nobody is above being asked any question. We have to constantly remember that the mission matters more than anybody's ego.
Right.
Right. That's how we have to lead. Wow. And I think that's part of what it means to be catalytic.
And imagine how simple that would have been, William, for you to have that mentality of who do you think you are? Right.
Sure. Oh, sure.
I mean, man, we got leaders all over the place that have that mentality, and then they can't understand why people, I had a client and they're struggling to keep people, and they can't understand why no one wants to work there. They can't understand why they have high turnover, high sickness, high this, high that, low engagement, and you have a leader that has that mentality. I'd be scared to death if I was in that ranks. I raise my hand and I get I either get my hand slapped or I get, my face slapped or whatever figuratively happens. But it's like, the reality is, you know what? Don't say anything, William, just shut up.
That's exactly right.
Like, oh my gosh, I'm okay. And we lose so much. I think a lot of that's why we don't have engaged employees, is because we put them in a surroundings where it's hard for them to be successful. So I'm glad that you didn't yell at the guy or girl that said that. So congratulations. Unless it was your wife. It was your wife that you had no choice at that point.
It was not. It was not.
Okay.
But they know that. They know that that's value for me.
Yep.
That it is critically important. What I talk about is the first 90% of feedback and honesty is not hard. The first 90% is what we're comfortable giving to pretty much anybody.
Yeah.
The last 10% is what we hold back on.
Yep.
And depending on the culture that you have created, and every team, every department, every organization has culture, whether intentionally created or not, it still has one.
Right.
If you've created a culture where you want the last 10%, that's where the magic is.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to see transformative change.
Wow. Yep.
If you don't want that, if you punish when people share a little bit of that, guess what? You're never going to hear it. You will never see it, and you will never benefit from it.
Yeah. And I think that's the negative intentional piece, is when you intentionally keep your team, down, push them down. I mean, plenty of us have blind spots where we don't know what we don't know. And that's why I think it's so helpful. Like when your group shared that with you, you have a choice right at that spot. You can either go, oh my gosh, thanks for sharing, I'm going to get better because it was a blind spot and you didn't know you had it. Or, you don't know what you're talking about. That's the spot where you have that choice as a leader. And I just want to encourage anybody listening today, when the next time is that you're at that spot where you get challenged, you get, reprehended or whatever, you get corrected, just have the grace to say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. Yes. I did not know. Yes. That's going to get you so much farther than, if you tell me that I didn't do what I did, I'm never going to ask you again. I'm never as on your group. I'm never going to share that again. And you're going to ask me what went right. And I'm going to be like, oh, it was awesome. What went wrong? And nothing. What could we do better? Nothing. Okay, we're done. Three words, done. So
what great evaluation, right? How helpful that is.
Well, that was awesome. Let's go to lunch. 3 words and we're done, right? We'll do this again in 6 months, right? Just for fun. But yeah. So that's so cool. Wow. This has been so helpful for me, William. I got 2 more questions. I'm going to let you go. Number 1, what in the world are we going to have William Attaway's tip of the week be this week?
I think it's going to be to cultivate an intentional, teachable spirit. That's a choice. And you and I get to make it every day.
Wow.
And if I could communicate one thing to every leader who's listening to this, it's that you can choose to cultivate that in yourself, to approach every situation with a learning posture, saying, what can I learn here? Remember, that's a choice.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is so cool. Well, and then the question that's always fun is, what's one thing that most people don't know about you that you feel comfortable sharing? As a high C, this is going to be really awkward for you. I can already tell. He's already like, let's scrap this question. Go on to the next.
Most people probably would not know that I have spent several seasons on archaeological digs, working in Jordan on the northeast side of the Dead Sea, helping to uncover so much of what happened there in the Middle Bronze Age.
And I got it. All right. We're way over time, but oh well. What in the world are you looking for? Because I see this. I'm like, what are you looking for? Tell me in 15 seconds or less. What are you looking for?
This is a site that's been going on. The excavation's been going on there for about 15 years now. And based on what we've uncovered so far, we believe that this is the site of the biblical city referenced as Sodom.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. Totally separate podcast. I'm having you back on this one. That is so cool. I tell you what, if you're listening today and something resonated, I'm going to encourage you to do what I tell you every week, rather than just put this down, rather than just go on to your next podcast, rather than go back to whatever it was you were doing. I want to encourage you to, reach out to William, reach out to me, but William's here to help become a catalytic leader, rather than being all about me, rather than being all about all that I can gain. Why not think about, encouraging change first in yourself and then in other people? Find, some really positive things about your group, share them with them, spend some time with them, invest in them. If you're struggling, again, I encourage you to reach out to William. So as we land here, what's the best way, William, for somebody to get in contact with you if they want to learn more about what we talked about today?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for William Attaway. You can go to my website, catalyticleadership.net, to find out more about the coaching and speaking that I do. And I would love to offer your listeners a free copy of my new book. If you go to catalyticleadershipbook.com and you're willing to help cover the cost of the shipping inside the continental US, I'd love to get a free copy of the book out to you. My goal is to get this into as many hands as I can so you can benefit from so many of these insights that I've learned from coaching leaders in so many different contexts over the last 20 plus years. Awesome. Wow. Catalyticleadershipbook.com. That's it. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that piece. Now there it is. If you didn't learn anything, then thank you for hanging out with us, but here's still the opportunity for a free book. If you did learn something, again, take what you learned today and bring it inside and find some change that you really instill in your life. So, William, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Now that you're done, you're going to have to spend 30 minutes just kind of processing all that happened and recoup right now that you're done with this. So hopefully you don't have anything planned after. So I know I'm so excited now, and I got to process everything that I learned today. So again, thank you so much for all that you're doing out there,
for us, and excited to read your book. Can't wait to get a copy of it. So you'll see my name shortly on your website for a book. And again, I appreciate all you've shared with us today.
Dave, thanks so much for having me. It's been an honor to be here, truly.